It's now 7:02 p.m. and we'll call the September 7th Board of Health meeting to order via roll call vote.
Okay, Daryl Beardsley present.
Matt Beavers present.
Lisa present.
Vitale present. And with that, I think we've got one addition to the agenda, which I think we can batch out pretty quickly, which is availability for additional free at-home COVID-19 tests available for the Board of Health. So do I have a motion to update the agenda accordingly?
So moved.
Seconded.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Vitale, aye. So maybe with that, Ellen, can we just open with that piece of business? Because then I won't forget that I didn't check it off because I don't see it on the screen.
Yep.
And
I think
Sorry.
Daryl doesn't have, I thought that was actually on the amended agenda. Ellen,
Yeah, it is. And
well, it was, and I replaced this. So why is not? Oh, I don't know.
but I think that's the only difference. And since
it
Matt
is.
voted on it, let's just stick with it, Daryl. I think it's okay.
And Daryl, do you want to share? I'm happy to share my
Yeah,
screen.
no, I was going to stop sharing so that you can
Perfect.
take over.
And so, Ellen, do you want to just give us a brief update in terms of the distribution of the initial batch of tests we got and
Yep.
a description of sort of what's available now?
Yep. Initially, back in June, we received 810 tests. It was 9 boxes, test kits from the state. We're down to maybe 2 boxes, and that's only because we're starting to limit how many people take. So just late this afternoon, it was after 4 o'clock, I received an email from the state saying that we can now get more free test kits, and that Sherborn has been allotted up to 2,160 kits, which would be 24 boxes of 90 test kits. The initial distribution back in June, we got 9 boxes. So that was 810 kits. I don't think we'd have room to put all of the boxes if we took them all, but I think we could take maybe 12, which would be 1,080 kits.
That's more, that's like at least 1 kit of 2 tests for every household in town.
Yeah, just about. And we'd be able to, initially in the first grouping, I was going to give a full box to each of the churches in town, which I haven't done because they've been going just from out of town hall. So if we get more, I could do that, as well as continue letting residents come in whenever they need them, whenever they want them. So I just want your okay to order the 12 boxes of kits.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I talked about this earlier. And 12 sounds like about as much as it felt like we could store. And so
Yeah.
given that feels like a reasonable balance. Again, I'm glad they're getting taken and used, and that's the whole point of making them as accessible as possible. So, I think that's great news.
So I just have to fill out a form on the website. So I'll do that tomorrow. And it's possible we could start getting it. I will also have to put those stickers on every box, every test kit. But that didn't take too much time before.
Awesome.
But it's possible we could start receiving them in the next couple of weeks.
That sounds fantastic. Any concerns or reservations from anybody on the board, or do we still like free stuff?
I like free stuff.
Yeah, free stuff
I
seems
also,
good.
yeah, as we move into the indoor season, I think that could be helpful for people when they're planning get-togethers to
Yeah, and
do
that's what-
screening.
Yeah, and that's what the state had indicated in their email.
I
We
like
should
it.
acknowledge that free means Ellen's time putting stickers on all the boxes. But that still seems like a reasonable deal. Sorry, Ellen.
Yeah,
No, and it's a nice diversion.
it's like shelling peas.
Yeah.
I can help you, Ellen, if you need help. That
Okay.
sounds like a perfect job for me to do. Or
I
an
love it.
intern.
I love it. Well, Ellen, I think that sounds great. And so I think we are supportive and would favor proceeding accordingly.
Okay.
Perfect. In terms of other business, I think I would favor saving regulatory review for the end, just because I do see the Strauss is here, and I know Dan has a couple of agenda items on as well. So I'd favor putting the regulatory review and the discussion regarding documentation for deed recording at the end. Does that sound right to folks?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Daryl.
No, she said yes, and I said fine at the same time. Sorry.
Perfect. Consensus. And so with that, given that we've got Jacob and Dave Strauss here, I think, did I see Mark? Perfect, I see Mark. Do we want to go through the 75 Nason Hill building application? So I don't see
Sure.
the 127 Farm Road applicant. I think the Strausses were here quite early.
Okay, so the Board of Health has, with the agenda information, a most updated plan of changes to 75 Nason Hill. The applicant would like to resolve and add a room, and at the same time, the septic system, which was designed in 1977, showed it as a 3-bedroom. When you look at the architectural plans, you'll see on the second page after the address page, there's a showing of 3 bedrooms on the first floor with changes in red, and also a study on the second floor. In reviewing the file, I couldn't find any building applications for the study on the second floor. And this was prior to these owners having the house or owning the house. So not for sure what may have happened, but unfortunately the house now appears as a 4-bedroom by definition. Now the applicant has provided a couple options. One is they're noting bedroom 2, which is on the upper left of the first page, removing that wall. So you'd go down a hall and that whole wall would be open as one opportunity to reduce the bedrooms. They came back with, and that is also reversing the closet in that bedroom too. The other option that just came in recently was to look at the second option is labeled to remove the wall, and that wall goes into, it looks like a smaller room. I'm not for sure if that was labeled any certain type of room.
I think it was labeled office in the original plan. It is an office.
Okay, thank you, David. I wasn't trying to look for the wording on it. And
I don't know why they took out the,
That's okay. Thank you. I appreciate your help on that.
But wait, so would that open it up to a kitchen, which is a completely different use? So I'm not.
Yeah,
Is that the question? And is that even and the bedroom 2, 3? Are you saying you would turn that into one giant bedroom? I'm confused what that even is.
well, that discussion occurred, Lisa, where why not knock the wall down between the 2 bedrooms? But David's here, the owner, and he can explain the reasons why he did not want to do that. At the same time, room count is one thing, but the rooms functions, especially bedroom number 1, has a full bathroom in it. So that itself is a bedroom. There's nothing you can do about that.
Right.
And the other 2 bedrooms were labeled bedrooms, but they could be considered rooms because they're on the first floor and there's no bathrooms attached to them. There's a hallway between, another full bath. And so we were chatting about different options. And one I mentioned was maybe combine the 2 bedrooms into 1 bedroom, 2 and 3 into 1 bedroom. But I'll let David explain. I think he has some needs for his pets on that.
And can I just want to kind of make sure to frame, because I think for some of our room counts, it can end up a fairly broad discussion. So I think ultimately what we need to do is to say, with a 3-bedroom system, which sounds like all are in agreement is what is in place, we have 7 rooms and 3 bedrooms with which to work. And so ultimately the plan we have to answer as the board is, do the plans as presented satisfy that set of requirements or not? I think we're certainly happy to offer suggestions in a sort of limited scope, but I think, Dave, it's sort of up to you to figure out, how do I want to proceed with that? And it's kind of for us to call balls and strikes as we see them. But I think it's probably better for us to not get into a detailed discussion of exactly, all the different things you could consider. I think we could certainly give you guidance, but you know what you need, whether what we're talking about is there. And ultimately, we just need to get to a place where we say, this fits the regulations. We've got 7 rooms and 3 bedrooms. And so does that sound kind of like the right scope to folks? And if it does, I'm happy to pass off to Dave. My only other question I'd love to include in that pass off is, in looking at the plan, am I displaying the correct version on the shared screen right now with the demarcations in red, where the 3 red circles, to make sure I've got the right plan up? And is there any net new finished space in the plans that were described here compared to the state of the home when you purchased it?
Okay, so
Yeah, let me just check. Lisa, I see you off mute. Are you good, or do you have something you
Yeah,
want to?
oh, yeah, sorry, I was just listening, yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay, Dave, the floor is yours.
Well, I
Oh, go
just
ahead.
wanted to clarify, Matt, 3 bedrooms and 9 rooms, right?
Am I doing my math wrong?
Because you can only have 9, you're allowed 9 with 3 bedrooms.
I think you're on 7.
The 7 rooms, that's correct, because of the year the septic system was put in. If the septic system was put in after, I believe, 1995, under the new 1995 Title
Okay.
V code, you could have up to 8 rooms on a 3-bedroom.
Yeah, and it's that study, I just want to make sure I understand, like, even this layout. So I see the study in the bath in that, is that above the garage? Is that what that is? Is that?
yes,
Yeah, and obviously that could easily be used as a bedroom because there's a bath right there. And then the sunroom, is that a finished room?
yes.
It is.
Right, because I'm getting 8 rooms in my count.
So what I would say is, I struggled with this plan. I want to give Dave a chance to kind of share his piece. I suspect many of us hit the same struggles, which is why we're talking about it tonight, because it wasn't obvious for me that I could get there with what I had, but I also want to make sure Dave has a chance to talk about it before I get to that conclusion. Does that sound okay to the board?
Yes.
Perfect. So Dave, let me pass the baton virtually to you, and then you're welcome to kind of help us understand what you're doing. We'll then transition it back to the board. We'll sort of pontificate and chin scratch to try to think through it.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, where can I start? So we've owned the house for almost 2 years now, and we're doing an energy retrofit, and we wanted to add a screen porch to where it's shown on the plan. Now, when we bought the house, we understood it was a 3-bedroom house, and we considered the 3 bedrooms that are listed on the first floor as bedrooms. The second floor, which is, I don't know how it got labeled study. This room has, as far as I can tell, for us and for previous owners, it's been considered more of a rec room, exercise room, TV room than a bedroom. But I understand that now that according to the rules, that is considered a bedroom because it's on the second floor, at least for purposes of sizing the septic system. So we accept that. That's okay. And so beyond that, we have questions about whether we're talking about the number of bedrooms or the number of rooms, because I kind of count the rooms here, and we being me and the contractor counted the number of rooms and said, oh, there's 7 rooms here. But the agent Mark pointed out that the room that's labeled kitchen sitting nook would be considered 2 rooms because it has more than one function. So that brings us up to 8, and divide by 2, and that gives 4. So it's oversized for the size of the septic system. Now, this is the condition that we bought the house in. So that's what we're working with now. So I guess one of the questions I have is, again, are we trying to cut down the number of bedrooms or the number of rooms? And my impression is that we are trying to cut down the number of rooms. Do I get that right?
I am totally happy, if it's okay for me to steal the baton.
Go for it.
You know, so for me, I'm just gonna walk through my count for how I was doing it. And for me, I felt like we we're trying to do both. I ended up with 8 rooms and 4 bedrooms. And I think that some of the proposed changes solve the bedroom problem for me for bedroom 2, but still leave this sort of study quandary. And so as I counted through, I counted sunroom as 1, I treated sitting room and nook as 2, I treated kitchen as 3, bedroom here as 4, 5, 6, 7, and treated study as 8. And so I sort of landed at 8 in saying, we've got 2 spaces here with the kitchen in that kind of sitting nook area,
Okay, that's
treated as separate.
okay.
And
I agree with that count. That's what I got too, Matt. I
And-
think it makes sense.
And me as well.
The issue isn't also their use right now. The issue is what's the next person gonna use it
Right.
for? Or is your situation gonna change? That
Right.
maybe, you know, your grandkids or your daughter or your son or whatever might come live with you and use the study as their space. So it's, you know, I just always would caution people to like, don't think of it as static, like that the current is permanent. It's really what else could people use it for?
Yeah, I totally understand that. Okay,
and I think the other tension for us is, you know, every time we get to a room count, it's because something like the ones that go super smoothly and everybody's on the same page never come to the full board because it went really smoothly and the permit gets approved and there's no room count question. Because if Mark had counted 7 and 3 bedrooms and you counted 7 and 3 bedrooms, it doesn't need to come to us to talk and think about it. It's those ones where there's some sort of difference in interpretation or understanding that come to us. And so part of what we're also trying to do is to make sure we're consistent with our rules, but also consistent with our general patterns of practice. And so to go back to your earlier question of, let's be really explicit about the problem we're trying to solve. For me, it was a room count issue. And it was, if we remove those walls, how do I treat that space? How do I think about that space? And was that enough to remove its roomness? And for me, when I sort of looked at it, it was a, you know, if we, and again, this is kind of me talking to the board too, not me rendering, you know, this is the final determination. I sort of felt like if I look at this plan and we'd seen this plan with those sort of walls removed in the red circle, so we sort of weren't talking about it as a change, and we had these walls out. So again, you're just saying, you know, when you look at this, what do you call it? Even with that space open, I would sort of call this a room because it's clearly demarcated. It's sort of its own space. If that entire wall is open, I think the question of like, you know, how does this connect to the nook or to other things? And is this part of the great room becomes the operational question. For me, it still feels like a physically distinct space and looking at the plan. I'm not totally sure I'm right. I think I'm right.
I concur.
But that's like why.
And that's how we've treated that kind of space, I believe.
and
Yeah,
it's-
and I would agree too.
And it's the same tension with if we open up the room for bedroom 2 that we sort of have here, I have to describe like, what is that thing? Like, what is that alcove or that sort of space that we have? And for me, it's kind of the question of my buckets of things that aren't rooms are entryways, mudrooms, bathrooms, hallways, mezzanines, you know, those kinds of things. And it sort of doesn't fall into that bucket. And so for me, that part is still a real struggle if we take out this wall. I think that taking out this wall makes it easy to say this is no longer from a bedroom count standpoint, that's no longer a bedroom because there's no wall there. And for me, opening that up, similar to this, if there's no door, no wall, I think it's still a room. I'm entirely comfortable calling it not a bedroom. I think its bedroomness has been illuminated, but I can't call this a mudroom, an entryway, a mezzanine, or something else, and it's not connecting elsewhere. So for me, taking this out or taking that wall out may change the bedroomness for bedroom 2 and isn't applicable for that sort of office space that we've got here. but it still left me with the room count issue. And again, for me personally, what I landed at, which may be unappealing, is if bedroom 2 and 3 were one room, from my standpoint, that then solved it, because then I can say, I've got 1 bedroom, I've got 2 bedrooms, the 3rd floor, while not used as a bedroom either by yourself or historically, appears to meet the definitions in the typical applications. And then it says, yep, we're good. That takes out both a bedroom and a room. So with that change, I land at 7 and 3, and it totally passes the sniff test. At least-
I agree. But so like basically what we're saying, I think, Matt, what you're saying is you would need to completely eradicate the barrier between room 2 and 3 and actually close off the door, like have one entry into that and have like a really big bedroom, because otherwise it's still functionally 2 rooms.
So, so I'll first admit that I forgot about the 1995 issue. And so I think I said 9, but I meant 8 because I was thinking of the 8-bedroom minimum issue. And so we're in a tricky spot here. We need to get to 7. Is there a way in which we treat this sort of backspace that's by a door as a suite? Which it's something else we've done previously. I'm not sure we can, but I just want to sort of think about that. If that wall into bedroom 2 is gone and we treated this as sort of a sort of secondary primary bedroom suite, does that work? The pantry there, I think, makes it tricky because that's sort of like a separate use case. Is that what looks like it's labeled pantry? Is that really a pantry?
Yeah, I don't see that as a suite. Yeah, that's just stretching it too far. I really think the only way you could get to the 7 is if you completely removed any partition between 2 and 3 and actually closed up that space. Not necessarily open it, but close it so that it's actually one large functional room. Because otherwise, to me, it's 2 rooms. Like, I don't know. Maybe
I think if pantry there was walk-in closet, like across the way, and bedroom 2 wall comes down and it becomes a sitting area, I think that's very similar to things we've done in the past. I think if pantry stays a pantry, that's hard to call it that.
The pantry is actually partially utility room too. It has water heater in the well, pressure tank, so it's not just a room. Yeah, okay, let me talk about how we use the house. So I mean, this is our dilemma. Bedroom 2 is actually our dog room right now. We have 3 dogs and we need a space for them that we can put them when we have people over to visit that's separate from everything else. We're also trying to, we're getting older and we're trying to keep everything as much as possible on the 1st floor. So we actually don't want to put the dogs up on the 2nd floor because that kind of defeats that purpose. So if we remove the bedroom 3 is like our guest bedroom. It's for when people come to visit. So if we remove that wall, then we kind of lose both the dog room and the bedroom. So this is our dilemma. So I don't know what to do.
Daryl, I see your hand up. Can I ask one clarifying question first?
Yep.
Or would you? So Dave, again, like I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but just if you're like, oh yeah, that would totally work. I just want to get to that. If the 2 walls that face the interior space for bedroom 2 are half walls, would that meet the needs of the dog room, or does it need to be full walls for sort of
No, the half we've suggested that a half wall between the hall and bedroom 2 would be fine.
Could we do it between, because for me, like,
between bedroom 2 and bedroom 3?
like the whole kit and caboodle. So we're sort of, again, like, for me, it's partly trying to think about how do I make it specific enough to the scenario that it's not a generalized precedent. And for me, if it's like, hey, this is a half wall, that feels non-roomness. It's sort of some weird in between that I wonder if might work for your use case for giving some physical bounds to the dogs.
Yeah,
but again,
closets too, though.
Yeah. And so let me let you mull that, and I'm going to pass the baton to Daryl since I interrupted.
Okay, so I just have one simple question and then I'll go on to something else. But is there a basement in this house?
There's a very small basement. It's the size of the sunroom. It's underneath the sunroom.
Okay, and it's not finished in any way.
That's correct.
Okay, so I don't know if you've had a chance to consider the condition of the septic because it's coming up on 44, 45 years old, which is sometimes a fairly typical lifespan for septic systems, and whether you've had anyone take a look at that and what condition it's in
Well,
for performance, because I think, oh, on the old plans, it could also be that it's quite shallow to groundwater. So I don't know if that's maybe impacting your well, but then you wouldn't really have to change anything if you could improve the septic and upgrade it to match the house.
oh, what's that? I don't have planned the as-built plans for the septic system. I know, I mean, of course, they did the Title V inspection. They had to sell the house, and that's all I know, actually.
We actually do have a plan on the agenda items that goes along with the review of the building app. I think it's one back.
Yep, what I would say is I just want to be cognizant of time. I think we have a 7:30 appointment. Is that correct?
Yes, for
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna ask is, Ellen, if you're able to do it easily, I'm wondering if you can email Mr. Strauss the as-built plan, just so you can look at that, and then we will kind of recirculate that when we can get back to it on the agenda. Is that? And Dave, I don't want you to give your email on this because it's a recorded meeting. Do we have, Mark or Ellen, do we know if we have Mr. Strauss's email address available to us?
I
think-
can't really email it without logging off. of the-
Okay, perfect. Mark, do you have Mr. Strauss's email address?
I will look. I'm not for sure. I'll look right now.
Perfect, okay. Dave, I'm sorry to do this to you, but because we've got a scheduled meeting and it's a variance hearing, we sort of need to adhere to it. So I suspect that we will kind of be 1, 2, 3 for the 7:30, 7:15, 8:10. We may be able to dive back in and sort of bits and pieces, but it may be that it'll take us a little bit to get to it. My
Okay.
apologies, but it's
Okay.
just sort of our constraints.
Okay, thanks.
So with that, we will open the variance hearing for 60-Page Farm Road.
And we do have all of the green cards.
Perfect.
Everything came back, so it's all set.
Perfect. And I think, Dan, are you the engineer? And I think I saw you on here.
Yes.
Perfect. Do you want to just kind of introduce the background and I'll pull up the plan?
Sure. This is a existing 5-bedroom house that was constructed in 1967. It was recently sold and failed the Title V inspection. So we were retained to design a new one. The existing system, if you look at the picture now, the Page Farm Road is over to the left-hand side. You'll see the well is in the front yard. The existing septic system is directly behind the house, between the house and the pool. We did some testing out there in a couple of different locations. Down toward the bottom of the screen, we did a couple of test holes there. We got one deep one, and on the other one, we hit some ledge shallow. So we weren't able to relocate it there. So we did some test pits on the other side of the septic system. And basically we're proposing to put the system back where it originally is now. We're gonna mound it up higher though because of groundwater issues. So we're kind of blending it into the back of the house where the house is already mounded up. Make it more of a level backyard and then slope it down toward the in-ground pool. We will have both a septic tank and a pump tank to overcome that elevation difference between the plumbing in the house and the elevation of the leach field. We are proposing to use the innovative technologies, the Elgin system, in a trench configuration for a couple of reasons. One is that we're looking to reduce the footprint slightly so we can fit it into this area. And second, it improves the effluent quality of what's coming out of the trenches because we are asking for a variance on the 5 foot to 4 foot under the Sherborn regulations. There's only 2 variances we're asking for. One is that 5 to 4, and the other one is the groundwater table less than 5 feet below the surface, which is a kind of a naturally occurring condition that we can't really design around. Other than that, it meets Title V in all respects and all other aspects of the Sherborn regulations. So with that, I can turn it over for questions.
I don't, I think all the siding, at least for me, everything sort of made sense. I don't remember seeing a system that was quite as close to a pool as this. I don't imagine there are any issues because by definition, the pool darn well be watertight. Otherwise, it's just a cement hole. But are there any special considerations given that proximity, or am I just sort of not thinking on the scale that this property is?
Well, the Title V offset for pools is 25 feet. And we're in excess of that. Not exactly sure how much because I didn't put that on there, but
It probably looks like at least 40 feet.
yeah, I would say about that. Yeah, it's over 30 feet anyways, about 35.
Okay. Perfect. And then I guess so that was one question that makes sense to me. And then the other piece is and again, like I'm sure we've seen it before. In this one, on that bottom right of the system with the crossing, again, just thinking about the electrical system crossing over the vent. Or it looks like crossing over the line to the vent. I just wanted to make sure I understood what that is basically where we've got the electrical line that goes to the shed adjacent to the pool. Transits an area of some kind of venting pipe that then comes out via the granite post at the bottom of the kind of above the benchmark nail tree. Am I sort of thinking about that right?
That's exactly right. The vent pipe is going to be the higher pipe because it's relatively shallow. It's probably going to be, you know, a foot to 18 inches below
Okay.
grade.
And
The electric line will be below that. Electrical code requires at least 30 inches of cover over the electric line.
Okay, perfect. That was the other part I just wanted to make sure I understood. With that, let me mute and see if any other members of the board have questions or comments on the plan before we get to the variance letter.
I think as usual with the well to the left on the plan, blocking off use of that area. And then other constraints, I'm not sure what's farther to the right of the property, but it looks like it, I don't know, was there anywhere else that was even feasible on this property?
Well, as we go farther to the right, the property drops off and there's a wetland down in the back end of the property.
Ah, okay. Okay, so looks to me it's a reasonable spot then, it's feasible, and there is only one variance, which is somewhat remarkable in a way.
Questions from folks or okay to jump to the variance letter?
Just so the board knows, it's 30 feet from the closest point of the Elgin drain to the pool.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mark.
And it looks like a pretty gentle slope, not like a steep. Right, Dan? It's not like a big topographic.
Right, we
change.
went with a 5-to-1 slope,
Yeah,
which is a little gentler than they have now. If you can see on that trench closest to the house, they have a slope with those stone steps going down to the backyard. We're essentially relocating those stone slope back and entering right into the pool fence opening. But it'll be a shallower slope for sure.
I like that.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. With that, am I appropriately sharing the variance? It looks
Yes,
like it's even the right property, so we're doing good.
Yeah,
Do I have a motion for a variance to section 8.01 groundwater offset to 5 feet with 4 feet provided by Title V.
So
So moved.
moved.
Oh, second,
Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Okay, Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Matt Vitale, aye. Do I have a motion to approve a variance to 8.02 depth to seasonal high groundwater less than 5 feet, which is a naturally occurring condition?
So moved.
Second,
Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Matt Vitale, aye. And Mark, are the plans ready for approval?
Yes, they are conditional to a deed recording for the innovative alternative technology and for the garbage grinder, but I don't know if you want to make that vote after you close the hearing.
Perfect. So do we have a motion to, do I need a motion, Ellen? I'm
Well,
getting
you can
rusty.
just state
You can
that
just
we're
close the
closing
hearing.
If I'm the chair, can I get the official Board of Health gavel and then I can just talk? So with that, we'll close the hearing. And then do I have a motion to approve the plans with the conditions as described by Mark?
Not yet. I have a question on the plan. Under, in the upper right, just below the locust map, there's the capacity box. And there the garbage grinder says 10, 11 max, but elsewhere it says no garbage grinder, like down below that.
I took this as the 1967 design memo made the 10 no and 110 all off by a line.
Yeah,
Like
I
we
thought
needed
it was
like a
it's
smaller font.
prohibited. Yeah, I thought the same.
I believe Dan can say that's correct, but I'll let him
Yeah,
say.
sorry, I didn't pick up on that.
So can we add a condition then that be corrected so no one is confused in the future that they can have a garbage grinder as long as it's 10? So,
Yeah, we can fix that up. Yeah.
okay.
Can I also request that it be Helvetica?
Well, and just,
Doesn't it already say that a garbage grinder is prohibited?
Well, no, it's
Yes.
just next to garbage grinder, it's there, but I do think it makes sense to make it so everything lines up, but
There.
easy enough.
Fair, okay.
and just so the board knows, the house consists of 5 bedrooms on the second floor, excuse me, and a total of 11 rooms. There are 4 rooms on the first floor and 2 finished rooms on the basement floor. So there are 11 rooms total within the house. And I think that's what Dan was referencing.
Perfect. Sounds good.
All right, so then the motion would be to approve the plans conditional to receipt of the garbage grinder deed recording and adjustment of the plans.
As it relates to the capacity box. So moved.
Yes.
And also the DEP notice of alternative system deed recording.
Okay, so 2 deed recordings.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was drawing the box while you were talking. Yes, that was my second recommendation, that there be a deed recording for the innovative alternative technology.
And should he make that change before getting the release of the permit, or should it be with the as-built?
I would say as-bilt's fine. Dan's plans are pretty good, but if he wants to come in and draw, what I just did is I drew a box around each one of them so they would separate. So for the garbage grinder, I drew a box down to no, whatever it says, no use is prohibited. But if Dan wants to come in and just initial that and do the same, he's welcome to it. And then indicate.
I can fix it up now because I'd like to put that dimension to the pool on the plan as well. So that's on there.
Okay, that's fine.
So I've heard a motion from Daryl. I will second it.
Okay. Any other discussion, or shall I vote?
Hearing none.
Okay, Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Matt Vitale, aye. Thanks, Dan. We will
Thank
see
you.
you in, I think, I don't know, 40 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is.
Okay, I'll be here.
Sounds good. I have managed to obscure my clock. So we've got, I think, 8 minutes before our next scheduled appointment. So Dave, are you still here and available? Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Whatever. I was going to ask if you wanted to do 127 Farm Road. Both of them were under Dan's review. but I forgot we have still the pending.
What I would say is I think we've got a shot at 127 in 8 minutes. So with that, let's kind of keep the Dan train rolling. My apologies, Dave. Does that sound reasonable to folks?
Dan, are you okay with that, or do you mind waiting till after your 8:10?
Oh, if we can, I think we can get it done in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Perfect, let's do it. All right, Dan, I've got I guess the floor plan for the accessory. Is it helpful to do that first, or do you want to just do the septic plans?
Well, we could go over this. This is the accessory apartment.
Yep.
So it's a 1-bedroom unit. We sized the septic system for 3 bedrooms because that's the minimum required by Title V.
Perfect. So we've got 3 rooms here and 1 bedroom, and you designed for 3 bedrooms. So we're covered from a room count standpoint with room to spare. Here's the accessory apartment plan. And do you want to just walk us through that, noting no variances are required for this plan?
Right,
is
this was,
correct.
this area of town has got nice sandy gravels, no groundwater to speak of. So we installed a conventional stone and pipe septic system with a 1,500-gallon septic tank. It's about as straightforward as you can get for a septic system.
I have a kind of bigger picture question on this. It looks to me like the existing system for the main house is 2 leaching pits potentially, or cesspools there on the end of a tank. Is
Yeah,
that
there's a septic tank and 2 leach pits that
Okay.
passed Title V inspection in December of 21 when these people bought the house.
so? And that was before. Is that before we passed our cesspool?
I think that was after we passed our cesspool, because we passed our cesspool pre-pandemic.
But those would have passed as pits.
Yeah,
No, it's
that's
okay.
true, right.
Yeah.
I'm going to be proposing an amendment for that.
Oh, okay.
But anyway,
They're very
so-
common in sand, just so you know. Back
Yeah.
in the 60s and 70s, pits were used a lot when there was a sandy soil. But
yeah, I could,
again, I respect what you're going to probably project, and they're not far from a cesspool.
yeah. So anyway, they're already building a significant system for just a 1-bedroom accessory apartment, and then another system for the kitchen. Has there been, I mean, so it seems to me they're part way to being able to support the house. Is there any consideration? I see there's extra,
We did
lines
reserve
noted.
space. We did reserve space for the house system in the future.
Mhm.
But, there are some, financial constraints. They're trying to,
Mhm.
get their business going and get the apartment up. So, and they do have a passing Title V system, so.
Right.
Yeah.
So I understand that. It just also looked like in the future, it might be hard to get back to that area to do work, but I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with what's over there, since they can't go in through that greenhouse. But, okay, that's it. I was
Well,
just
that
about
that
that.
greenhouse is just some sticks with plastic on it. It's not a.
Oh, okay. All right. It's more like a hoop house, it sounds like, or
Yeah.
something. Okay,
And so I imagine our discussion for tonight is just to make sure, again, this is different than most of the things we do. We don't need a variance. So Mark, do you need a vote from us on the plan? Are you okay approving the plan, given there are no variances, or do you want to vote from the board?
Well, I would recommend that the plans be approved conditional to the deed recording for the garbage grinder.
Okay.
And one other note, and it's already an existing condition, but it's leading a new water line possibly into the existing building. You'll see the water line in blue. Well, it does cross, and I'm not, Dan, are you aware if it crosses below the sewer line that goes to one of the pits, or is it above the sewer line that goes to one of the pits? Yeah, right there, right at that spot.
The tank is fairly deep, so I think it's above that, the line going to the leach pit, between the D box and the leach pit. I think it's above that.
Okay, thank you. The only thing I'd recommend is that be determined. And if the water line is below the, what we call the, not the building line, but the sewer line going to the pit distribution line, and I would recommend the water line be pressure tested once the new line goes in.
And with that, what would that be a condition of? Like, how do we fix that?
Or a crossover of a water line on a distribution line of sewage. So Dan is most likely probably correct, though, on the fact that it's above the sewer line, but just in case, if it's not, then in Title V, it does require that you pressure test the line. I think it's 150 pressure PSI, if I'm not mistaken, they test for.
And that's testing the water service line at the 150 PSI.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And so are you recommending that as a condition for approval of the plan, or?
Yeah, it'd be the same condition for the other plan too, is that it be explored to make sure it's above the distribution line to the pit. If it's not above the distribution line to the pit, then the pressure test be conducted.
So do I have a motion to approve the plans as presented for the accessory apartment as designed with no variances, conditional to a garbage grinder deed recording and an evaluation of the positioning of the existing water service line relative to the sewer line to the southmost pit, and necessary pressure testing should it be below said line?
So moved.
Second,
Any further discussion?
Daryl, I.
Beaver's eye.
Lisa, I.
Matt Vitale, aye. And with that, let's jump into the commercial kitchen. Again, we've got the existing barn, we've got the service line or the drain line to that then goes to the septic system. So I would imagine we would need a similar sort of position relative to water line here to be compliant with Title V, but that in that case, it's a new installation, correct, Mark? So that would just be part of the install process, not a condition for this plan.
That is correct.
Or no, maybe I'm misreading that. Sorry, I may be conflating. Dan, is this line would be, oh no, because it's new, so we just have to position it with the install.
Yes.
Right.
And in this case, Dan, I think that you used the only part that I saw, I had no concerns, it all sounded reasonable. It seemed like you took a reasonably conservative approach to the gallons per day that you're assigning to it, which is, we're using this for the sort of meal per seat calculation to arrive at the design flow for it, which sort of passed the gut check for me. I think that's consistent with what we described when we had talked to the applicant initially and thought that that was a reasonable and conservative approach. Is there any further discussion on that topic by the board? And if not, I'll be happy to move towards a vote on the plan.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything on that, but going back to the lines where they are, I don't know if it's only in the install and how much flexibility you have of how low you could push that septic line, depending on where the water line is.
On this crossing, the septic line is shallow, so it would be above the water line.
Okay,
And so,
all right. So there would have to be some testing.
And
Right.
what is that annual? Like, what's the cadence of that testing? Is that once at installation to just confirm everything's proper?
It's done during the construction process. They would pressure test the water line at that time.
And so, since we will be involved in that process, does it need to be a condition?
I would say so, a condition just like we do for the garbage disposal grinder, deed recording.
Okay, so then this would have the same two conditions, which is conditional. In this case, it's not to the location. We know that the waistline will be above the water line, conditional to the pressure testing during the process of installation. of the associated water line and conditional to the garbage grinder deed recording.
That is correct. Yep.
Okay, so moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Matt Vitale, aye. I was waiting for Rebecca, but she's not here. So with that, Dan, we'll see you at around 8:10.
Can I just get a confirmation that that pressure testing can be done during construction? It's not, don't have to do that ahead of time to get released the permit, right?
No, Dan, that would be part
Okay.
of the process when you install the system.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Okay, with that, we are now at 7:53, so we're pretty close to on time. And we've got the Farm Pond Advisory. And who's the discussant for that? Is that, Ellen, is that us or is, oh, I see Melissa coming off mute, so maybe it's you, Melissa.
Melinda, yep,
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
that's okay.
I need transition lenses, but I haven't done it yet. So fire away, you've got the floor.
Oh, already? That's so exciting. Hey, everybody. Just, I guess, for official purposes, I'm Melinda O'Neill, and I'm one of the Farm Pond Advisory Committee members. I'm the author of the Farm Pond HCB Rapid Response Plan. It is not, necessarily my work. Tom Trainer and I worked together to put it together. My role really was just sort of capturing all of the discussions and meetings and information that really started last year when we had our first bloom. So it includes like input from the Board of Health and all that jazz. So I'm here before you to, number one, check in and see if anyone had a chance to look at it. And what I thought I would do is just do like a walkthrough that won't take a lot of time, just as a point of example to so you can see the sort of vision I had as I put it together. And then we can just jump in and you guys can give some input or feedback or ask questions. I guess, does that make sense?
Yep.
Sounds great.
And
Sounds
I
good.
did get a chance to look at all of it, so.
Me too.
Oh, great.
Me
good.
too. Yep.
Okay. So I guess, who's controlling the screen?
I am controlling and I will, you tell me what to do and I'm happy to do it.
Oh, I love that. All right. So let's pretend that my neighbor Ken calls me up and he says, "Hey, Melinda, I saw some green stuff floating on Farm Pond. What do you think's going on?" And so I would jump on the, wherever I keep this, I call it the blue bubble document, and right up there, potential bloom is reported. And you can see immediately go to that live link. Let's click on that. It says, what should I do if I see lots of green stuff floating on Farm Pond? This document was designed intentionally to be available to share widely. So it both supports this blue bubble action plan, but additionally, the thinking was that this is something we could share over Nextdoor. The yacht club could do an e-blast, and it would give people lots of good information about what's happening here. So if we look at this document real quick, Ken calls me up. He's like, "Melinda, what's going on?" I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough. This is not something I would go through with the caller per se. This is just the background. So what is the green stuff? At number one, just gives you some pictures that actually came from Farm Pond. A brief description of what this cyanobacteria, the HCB, is. Why is it a problem? That's number two. So residents understand and get some background information about what the problem is. And then you can see there's a live link to get more information. The third point is, how is it different from E. coli? And that's significant, as you guys know, because people get confused between E. coli and HCB and algae and what's dangerous, what's harmful, what's okay. So we wanted to give some information there. Number four, so what should I look for when I'm at Farm Pond? On the left, you can see a picture of Tom Trainer's arm with the green algae. And on the right is an actual stick, and they call it a stick test, which is fantastic, right? Because you can both do it yourself if you were at the pond, but you can also ask somebody that question. So in number 5, that's where we get to the meat of how I would respond to my friend Ken, who's seen this green algae. And I'd ask him, where'd you find it? Can you just sort of tell me which end of the pond is it? These sample sizes smaller than a car, tennis court, size of a football field. That is actually comes from, I think it was the state who came up with those markers. If you put a stick in it, there's the stick test, right? Would it drip off like paint, or is it going to hang on? How would you describe the color? Did you get any pictures of it? So all these things, can be done over the phone. They can be done through email. And then you can see right there underneath, again, this, if you envision that this document could be, somebody could pick up over next door, we ask everybody to email all of us or contact all of those groups, right? There's FPAC, the Board of Selectmen, the BOH, and the Yacht Club. The Yacht Club, in large part because we have a lot of trained folks down there that can help support the sampling. And also it's a good place to leave the sample down at the boathouse. And they've been great partners in all this work. So we want everybody to know, so we have lots of layers there, right? Because, a lot of this stuff happens over the summer, who's around, who can I get in touch with, those sorts of things come up. So I've asked Ken those questions. He's given me the answers. If I go back to my blue bubble sheet, we're at the second bubble that says action 1. And I just went over that piece where I've, contacted the other stakeholders. And then the second action is that we want to contact this trained group. Tom did a lot of work getting a number of people up to speed on how to look at the samples. And you don't have to go into that link, but that second link, the Farm Pond supporting document, is a draft start at explaining these bubbles in more depth. There's not a lot of information there. It's kind of a duplicate, really, but it's sort of like a placeholder. Like, do we need to give more explanation to the bubble sheets? And then right underneath it, it says the Bloom information is logged here. That's a live link to a data capturing form that Tom came up, drafted up for us, and it just asks for the basics. And then, so the next action is, so one of these people, let's just say for argument's sake, Taylor says, yes, I'm available. I can go down and take the sample. Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Taylor. She goes down to the shed. She knows how to use that microscope that we have and take a peek. And then there's one of two outcomes, right? Either she's concerned about it, or she can verify that that it's potentially toxic or it's not. Let's say she looks at it and she says, nope, this is just regular green algae. We're all set, not a problem. She's going to let us all know, right? So there's, there we are again, FPAC, the Board of Selectmen. Let's make sure that the gate and the waterfront's up to date, Board of Health and the Yacht Club. Or if you look back to the other side, she looks and she says, this is a problem. We think this is potentially toxic. This is where the Board of Health comes in, right? So we need you guys to let us know what we want to do next, how we want to manage this down at the pond, because if we've now learned that there's potential toxic cyanobacteria, we need to then take action, right? So if it's a threat and we're saying, yep, we've identified that this is does have a high marker for potential toxins, then probably what we're going to be looking at, right, is closing the reservation. We've got to update everybody, get the signs posted, update the website, let the stakeholders know. And then I put in a live link to a draft of like a threat warning and risk attention signs. We already have one that's been sitting up there since last year. My thinking was that we might be separating these two things out, right? So if a threat is, we really need to close the pond, we can't have anybody in there, we've identified something. The other option could be, maybe it's just a risk. like something has come and gone. We looked under the microscope. No, it doesn't look to have that sort of level of toxicity, but we do need to let the public know that we've seen this and that, you know, there could be some risks there. And then the same thing, those that live link to those sets of signs. And then if you drop down to that action 5, then we have to sort of vet out like, okay, if it was a threat and we did close the reservation, how long are we closing it for? You know, all those other things that come up from the standpoint of protecting the health and safety of the residents. That obviously is going to require discussion. And then no, it's over. We're all good. Looks like the threat or concern is concluded. And then we just want to make sure that we let everybody know, you know, get the signs down, get everyone updated. So that is the drive-through of the plan.
I have comments.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, I am a risk assessor, and so I deal with a lot of this kind of stuff all the time. A few comments. One, I think we should make it a much simpler communication scheme, like to say it could be this person or that person or that person means that there's actually not a dedicated point person. I think that's going to lead to confusion and delays. So I actually don't like that. I think it should be like, there should be, you know, a singular contact. They can reach out to other people, but I think to say it could be like Jeannie or Daryl or this person, I'm not a fan of that. I think that's going to lead to potential confusion and delays. I also think that we should have clear criteria, and it's either enough of a health concern that we're going to close it or not. Like, I am not a fan of like, just like, well, we're going to notify you that it's a potential risk, because then people are like, well, what does that mean? That's just going to be, to me, it seems like it's going to be, people are going to be very uneasy. It's going to be a lot of like back and forth with, you know, either Jeannie or Daryl or me or whomever, or you. And I think that's confusing. So I think we should just have like clear criteria for, this is either enough of a trigger that we're concerned enough that we feel we need to shut it down, or it's not. Because if you start getting into the netherworld of sort of, well, it might be a problem and we're going to leave it up to you if you want to assume that risk, I think you're just creating like a lot of confusion and concern. And then again, you're putting the pressure on the people like who are the contacts to sort of deal with the public. So I just think we should have explicit criteria for, we're going to shut it down or we're not going to shut it down. I don't like the sort of in-between messaging of it might be a problem, because I just think that's going to wreak havoc and cause a lot of alarm and unnecessary agita for people. So I just think we should agree on like, what do we think is enough of a concern to either close it and explicit criteria for reopening, or not. That's just my opinion.
No, I'm sorry, who just spoke?
That's me, Lisa Camp.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. I do a lot of health risk assessment. I'm an LSP and I have my MPH, and I have a lot of risk communication experience. And I just think too many tiers is just means confusion and complication.
I would echo, I think I had a similar reaction of, threat is hard because so many people will yell at me because they're like, no, but why did you close the pond? And it's like, well, I don't want your, like when, I don't want your dog to swim there just in general in pond season, see E. coli above. But two, like if something terrible happens, like, and we didn't take action, like, I think we just need to be ready as a, like, first I tried to figure out, is there any way to get out of this? Is this somehow the state's problem? And it sounds like very explicitly the state is like, nope, local health authority. And then I was like, at least we've got a gavel to defend ourselves with when we close the pond, because we already get it with the E. coli, and that's at least fairly clearly defined by the state. I share the struggle that Lisa describes, where if we say risk, I don't know what we're really telling people. And so I think we just need to own the fact that we need to have a binary state of people can either swim here or not. if we say you can swim, but you need to be careful, like, it sort of feels a little bit like we're sort of shirking it. If it's not safe, we should say don't swim. But then it gets into the question of like, if it's a cell phone size collection of cyanobacteria on the far side that somebody saw when they were kayaking, does that mean we close it or not? And I don't know the right answer to that question. I think that then becomes the work for us to define as a board of like, what is that threshold and what's the threshold for closure? So that we're not leaving a sort of risk that's like, it might be a problem, but it might not, because I
Right.
don't know what the end user, what we're really asking them to do. Because if we think there's cyanobacteria in there, it seems like we need to say, yep, it's closed, it stinks, I'm sorry.
So
Like,
what
yeah.
I agree with that to some degree, but I think right now, unfortunately, I feel like we're in the risk category already. The pond is green everywhere in the pond, and it has never looked like that for the last 2 years. It's like swimming in pea soup. So, and it's disconcerting, I would have to say. Very murky, doesn't look good. So I think we're already at risk, which is why the signs are up in general, just to alert people. I do agree that, right, we need a trigger. I think there's one of the other documents that Melinda provided shows when they look at a microscope, what they can see about the types of bacteria and whether it is the HCB. And so to me, that would be a trigger to say, if we see it, maybe that, no matter whether we know what the extent is, as you said, the cell phone size or the train size or whatever, maybe that's a immediate posting of the threat. Of course, I don't know that we're going to post police there to keep people out of the pond, so it's probably still going to be a risk thing, but we should at least say we consider it closed. And then,
So Derek,
and Melinda, I think your group is going to be more familiar with what kind of tests have been going on this summer when they're collecting the samples and sending them off. And do we get a sense of magnitude of an issue, or is it clearly just an on-off switch? Yes, we found HCB, or no, we didn't. I don't know if that's the line, or if
Well, I
it's
mean, could people who
find
are-
it plus an intensity of it.
I mean, Daryl, if people are just voting, they can always fall in. So if we're concerned enough that we think it's a potential public health threat, we have to assume that people even voting are coming in contact or if it capsize or whatever. So could we close the gate, I guess is my question, if we feel it's an actual threat. Again, like, I think we need to come up with explicit criteria that's not crazy conservative, but protective enough that we're comfortable
Mhm.
and very explicit. So, and if that's the case, should we just close it for access with, at the gate? And then, I don't know, is that?
Oh, no, I think that's reasonable in addition to the posting. People still find ways in.
You know what though, but Daryl,
Closed or not, new big
that's-
gates make it a little
yeah,
harder, but
that's always going to be true. So
yes.
I'm not saying that we don't make the postings in addition to closing the gates. But at that point, it's like, you're doing this against our advice. This is,
Yeah.
against risk. We just can't put like all this pressure on the cops to like constantly monitor the pond either. Like,
Oh, no,
think
I agree
sort
that
of
that's,
absurd. So, sure, like every once in a while, take a little scan, but I think if we think we should just come up with inclusive enough criteria that's reasonable to just say we're closing it down, period, or not. Because I think if it's an ephemeral thing and it's really tiny, does that merit closing it? Probably not. And so it's always like a balance. It's a risk management sort of decision that we have to make.
and so Melinda, for all the things that you've attended or others on Farm Pond Advisory, Tom, what are other places doing? Are they using just the positive identification of HCB as a trigger, or is it also amount?
That's a good question. I'll let, Tom, if you have more information, please
I
do.
can,
But just two quick things to share. And I think Tom is going to touch on this too, is one is digging into the nitty gritty on, what is the level is tricky, right? Because it's transient and, by the time we get the sample done and looked at, like the bloom could be gone. It's, so I know it is going to require some time. And then a second thing, which I can share with the board, not necessarily the second, but our chair, Catherine, just shared an email within like the past hour, because down at the Cape in Barnstable County, they did have a closure due to the cyanobacteria bloom. And they've got like a beautiful website and a description of their process. So I'll share that with you because that could provide some input too.
Oh, that's great. Actually, yeah, Barnstable County has a really large and well-developed public health department because they serve a large area and they're very progressive. They've been quite good on all sorts of septic and other topics for years. Oh, and just one other thing that Lisa mentioned, and then Tom, on that phone, like who to contact. This was, I recall, a discussion last year about, how to do this. And we were going to try a single point of contact. And really the only thing we could come up with was police calling into their 24-hour line and seeing if they would then go down the list of people to see who to get. So there'd be one point of contact, but they were not enthusiastic about that, but maybe we could revisit it.
So backing up a little bit, I sort of want to second others that I think a binary method makes more sense. I think the one thing to note is that there is a pretty well-established program for the Charles River, the Charles River Watershed Association, where they post flags basically based on both E. coli and cyanobacterium. And so it's blue flags if nothing, red flags if they're concerned about stormwater runoff or E. coli levels or there's a bloom. It again gets us into a middle ground area where, like, do you post a red flag but don't close the pond? And the Charles is different because they're mostly thinking about people that are boating rather than people that are swimming. But it's another sort of model that we could think about that people understand. And they also have sort of a really good website with a lot of sort of good informative information about what these flags mean and sort of how you move on from there. And it's a way to sort of not reinvent the wheel to think about that. Now, it may be that, if we see something and we're a red flag, which means there is a bloom, then it has to come to Board of Health to decide whether that bloom expands to closing the beach, but sort of leaving everything up the same way the Charles River were. I don't know how others think about that.
so this is Tom Trainer. Mr. Chair, can I add some comment?
Fire away.
This is great. This discussion's going on, and I agree with all the comments I'm hearing. And this is a very difficult situation. And I've been studying the pond for about 25 years. In the last 3 years, this has really come to the fore, and the pond has really changed. And could be from the droughts and a couple other things. But when it comes to what we're grappling with here, I'm going to suggest, because I don't know how much more time you have tonight, I'm going to suggest maybe a small working group of people from the Farm Pond Committee and the Board of Health, meet offline, because there's a lot more detail to go over. But the answer, I'm trying to remember if it was Daryl's or Lisa's question. The microscopy work that we're doing at the Yacht Club shed is very qualitative, and so we're able to train some volunteers to identify the most common cyanobacteria that we're seeing at Farm Pond. And just about every time I've taken a sample in the last 6 months at Farm Pond, I found cyanobacteria. It's there. The question is, of course, the concentration and the amount. and the associated cyanotoxins. And that's really not practical and timely to do. What a lot of towns do, in fact, nearby towns in Natick and others with bathing beaches, if they see a large bloom, and I don't know how they qualify what large is, they just close their beach. And they do it for 2 weeks. And that's a common recommendation from the state's Department of Public Health. But Farm Pond, I think, is a very difficult situation because it's so large and you have the beach at one end. Most of the cyanobacteria blooms we're finding are at the far end, the windward end. And so it's just one more question. So I just thought I'd throw that out there, but I think this is a very important topic, but could take a lot of time to talk through.
Yeah, I mean, like the risk, it's exposure and dose related. So the concentration, the exposure potential, that's what makes it. It's like the dose makes the poison. So, you know, I do think we have to take that into consideration, but that's why I was thinking, like, if we could come up with reasonable protective criteria to say this is enough a threat that we're concerned that even like a casual swimmer or something could have you know, an adverse reaction or enough exposure that we'd be concerned about potential adverse health effects, then we close it. Like I to me, yeah, I'm just not a fan of sort of that nether region of it. It's kind of up to you, but it's a potential risk because I just think that's a lot of stress on all of us. I think that's what that will lead to.
So I want to be mindful of time. I see Jeff's hands up, so I'm going to go to Jeff, then I'm going to steal the mic back, and then we can maybe talk about next steps, because it sounds like great start to the discussion, building on a lot of work that Melinda and Tom and the Farm Pond Advisory Committee have done, and it sounds like we have lots of opinions and ideas too. And so I just want to own the fact we probably will not resolve them in 5 minutes. So let's acknowledge Jeff, have that comment, and then focus on next steps so we can kind of get the right people together to help contribute to this effort. So Jeff, fire away.
Totally agree, and I'll be quick. Just one other data point for the sub-team to look at is that we're going January 1st to a remote dispatch center for the police department. So there won't be someone necessarily in the police station. So you may need to take into account how we factor that into whether or not they're part of the notification system.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Really helpful context. So for next steps, I want to piggyback that I love Tom's idea of the working group, and I want to also definitively not volunteer for it because I think that there is both better expertise and at least for myself, like the bandwidth is tricky, but it does feel like a wonderful next step to bring some additional expertise. For me, one of the most important questions is, it feels like we're clear on we need to talk about there's always some baseline level of danger, but we need to say, like, what's our red light? And that feels like the challenge for the board to address. I think some of that's in the work group to continue that exploration and discussion, but ultimately it's going to sit with us as a board to say, the state says we're a responsible party. FPAC isn't empowered to say, this is what it is. Like, that's the part we're going to need to own to say, is it a red light or not? And I think that is going to, like, that's not my favorite, but that feels like part of the working group, but also a piece we'll then need to bring back to the full board to say collectively we're responsible for this. We may get advice from the working group. Does that sound like the right set of next steps? And if it does, is anybody enthusiastic to volunteer for the working group to partner with the FPAC kind of on this?
So I'll say that I think I agree with those next steps. I also think that this is going to be something, one, I would like to borrow as much as possible from others who have gone before us, like Barnstable County. And then we're going to have to, with the working group, come up with our first cut at then how we apply it to our specific circumstances. And then recognize that we're probably going to be changing as we learn over time and everybody learns about this. And then on a side, maybe another path, I'd love to understand if there's anything that we can do about reducing nutrient loading or whatever else is going on, but that's not Board of Health, but just on, can we counter this if it's not only a matter of higher temperatures? Because it's really quite disturbing to see the change at the pond. And I would be willing to work on this because I love going to the pond every day in the summer. And the idea that I can't do that is heartbreaking.
Thanks so much. I was totally going to nominate you because you said we more than twice. So it's like, no, that's her. That's a tacit volunteering, but I think we'd really benefit from your expertise and engagement there. Melinda and Tom, is there anything else that you sort of have on your wish list is coming from us or things that we can do to be helpful tonight? Or does the working group feel like the right next step and we can kind of send it there and then bring it back to the board to own what red light looks like?
I think from where I sit, and I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but Daryl sort of opened up that idea, like to look at the pond more broadly and what the inputs are to the pond. And I know that the working group's focus will be to nail down this rapid response plan for the HCB, but I do like the idea of partnering up with Concom, perhaps the Board of Health, obviously FPAC, and start looking at some of those other factors. I think it's really important. And I think we need to acknowledge as a community that the area surrounding Farm Pond is changing. And so the things that used to protect it are changing. And so we want to be looking at that and thinking about it and doing our best to protect that little gem of water.
I love it. And I just also want to explicitly thank Melinda and Tom as another enthusiastic user of Farm Pond. Like, this is literally like what we knew about Sherborn when we visiting a friend in college many years ago. Like, I am so grateful that people like you volunteer your time to sort of be the, cyanobacteria SWAT team and look under the microscope and do those other pieces. So just a huge thank you for your volunteerism and efforts in those regards, because we all benefit.
Yes,
Hear,
and to all
hear.
the people scooping up
Agree.
goo out there.
I also,
Analyze
my kids are going to be into the stick test, whether or not anything's green. It will be a new pond activity that you're like, just put a stick in stuff and see if it drips off.
I feel like we could integrate this into like Pine Hill, environmental classes. Let's,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some really cool stuff, and you guys have done some incredible foundational work, and appreciate it, just all the time and energy that went into this.
Well, thank you. It's a labor of love, of course. So quick question, how do we move forward? Should I just reach out to Daryl and Tom?
I think so. And then I think that, we have a couple of different pieces that we're moving along in terms of sort of like we've got a bunch of regulatory stuff we're working on, which is sort of in parallel of like long-term projects around policy. And this is different than that. But again, I think planning to check in, maybe not at the next meeting, which is in 2 weeks, but the first October meeting, to just say, hey, what's the outcome? Because I sort of feel like winter is such a good time to make progress on this, with the goal of saying, when it's frozen, if you're swimming, you've got more problems than cyanobacteria. And, we have this window of time, but come spring, my hope is that we'll have ample rain and cool temperatures and it won't be actionable, but you'd love to get this figured out and resolved so that we feel like we have a high performing process, by spring melt. And so it feels like sort of having you guys follow up with Daryl as a next step feels great, but then continuing to have it on our radar to help keep us accountable as a board, to say, hey, you've got some key pieces that we've got to own, and to make sure that stays on the radar and progresses. Does that sound right to folks?
Yes, and for example, I was thinking, although we've kind of maybe missed it, and I don't know if we're the best ones to do it, the Board of Health, when I say we, for example, we've recently had applications, or we had to do renovation reviews for septic capacity compliance. And that would have been a good time to inform people that while you're knocking down walls and painting new spaces and doing whatever else, none of that stuff should be going into the septic, which could then destroy kind of the processes ongoing and affect how well the septic system is treating wastewater effluents. And so there could be a lot of pieces to this, and there may be some things specifically that the Board of Health could help with, or at least flag for further information to go out to people. I don't know
And
what we're going to do exactly, but.
And I think it sort of sounds like, I think this was Melinda point, it sort of feels like there's two phases. One is, what's our green goop phase, which is we have seen something, let's define the pathway so that when we need to use the process, everybody knows what the role is and it's clear and it's predefined. And there's this second larger conversation that's FPAC, Board of Health, work group, CONCOM, those pieces. It's like, how do we adjust to the changing climate and environment to make sure that this kind of treasured part of our shared community maintains the things that make it lovely? Because if Farm Pond ended up feeling like a swamp, that would be a shared tragedy for all of us. And how do we avoid that and say, like, what does stewardship look like? And that latter one feels like, I wish it could be a lickety split conversation, but that feels like it's a longer conversation that's probably going to take some choices that feel harder, because it's, thinking about asking stakeholders to do something different than they do by default. And that's going to be necessary for this to be successful, but that feels like a bigger lift than like, we cracked that nut in 90 days and now it's all set. Where having the green goop plan feels realistic for that timeline.
Yes, I agree.
With that, I'm going to close out this topic just to get to our 8:10 appointment, which we're somewhat not on time for. But again, just to close out, the big thank you to Tom and Melinda for all your hard work. With that, Dan, I think we're back to you with 30 North Main Street.
Okay. And I think I saw Steve Constantine on the line as well, the homeowner.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Steve. So Dan, I remember talking about this. I remember talking about it a lot. I'd love for you to just kind of introduce the sets of kind of issues and questions, and maybe you can frame the discussion for us in terms of what brought you back to us tonight. I think Ellen had provided some interval follow-up from Gino, and so I'll have her share that, and then we can discuss within the board. So maybe if you want to introduce the background of updates since the last discussion.
Sure. So one of the conditions of the septic system approval for 30 North Main was to prepare a approval not required plan for 3234 North Main Street to show the subdivision, because the board wanted to put the new septic system on property actually owned by 30 North Main rather than an easement. And we were also required by Title V to make sure that we kept at least 40,000 square feet on 3234 North Main as part of the nitrogen loading requirements for their septic system. So we sent the surveyor out and he prepared that plan. And we found out once we submitted it to the town planner that the zoning for Sherborn defines an acre as a full acre, the 43,580 square feet, as compared to the acre defined by DEP as 40,000 square feet. So we were a few thousand square feet short on that A&R plan that caused some concerns with the town planner. So we would, before we did anything else, we wanted to come back and talk to the board about this issue and see if there was any way we could change this so we could keep a full acre on that property and still maintain the septic design as is, which would essentially require going back to the easement discussion and putting a portion of the new septic system for 30 North Main on an easement from 3234, which is allowed by DEP under their maximum feasible compliance for a repair septic system. But the board was somewhat nervous about doing that when we reviewed it the first time. But it would simplify the subdivision process. And again, allow maximum feasible compliance for this new septic system.
I think that is super helpful background, Dan. Ellen, I know that you had some communication with Gino, and I'm wondering if you'd feel comfortable kind of summarizing your take home from that discussion.
Yeah, after I received Dan's email requesting this meeting back on August 30th, I did talk with Gino, the town planner, on September 1st. And I asked, from Dan's email, it appeared that the town would not approve the A&R with the 40,000 square feet. But Gino told me that he does have that A&R plan that the board approved on March 2nd.
And just when you said the board of health, not planning board, just for clarity.
Oh, yep, sorry. And he said that Gino told me that he had cautioned Mr. Constantine that these lot lines would create a further non-conformity on an already non-conforming lot, and that he should check with the zoning board of appeals for a finding such that if he creates another non-conformity, he won't lose the grandfathering on that lot. But he said Mr. Constantine has not gone to the ZBA for that finding yet. And Gino told me that he has that A&R plan that the board had requested. And he told me the planning board would definitely approve it, but he was just waiting to hear back from the owner.
And so I would say from my own reaction, and then maybe we can sort of turn it over for initial impressions for other members of the board, is, I remain deeply unenthusiastic about the easement because I think it opens a whole kettle of fish that literally wakes me up at night. I mean, not really, mostly it's like climate change and giant meteors, but that easement piece for me opens up an incredibly complicated slippery slope that I remain really unenthusiastic to go down. If we ended up in a place where the ZBA said, look, we're definitely not going to kind of keep you whole, and this definitely does remove your grandfathering, and that introduces a whole new host of issues, I think in that context, I would be willing to do it because there's no other recourse for the property owner to replace the cesspools that are there, and that, as near as I can tell, are about 2 Pepsis and 3 steps from the well. So it's certainly a substantial improvement with what's proposed. But at least for me, I feel like the easement has to be an absolutely, truly last resort. And I would be deeply ambivalent about doing it if ZBA still doesn't do it, because I hate the idea of the easement. But at least in that case, I can tell myself there's literally no other recourse. But without that, at least for me, I sort of don't get there. But again, I'm always confident, but sometimes I'm wrong and confident. So I would welcome the discussion of other members of the board and their takes on it.
I had a similar feeling of, I'd like to hear what ZBA has to say before we make a change.
And Lisa and Matt, what are your thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I agree. I really didn't like the easement either. So I think if there's any way to avoid it, that would be preferred.
Me too. I'm there.
And what I would say is if ZBA says something different and says, nope, here's again, for Steve and for Dan, it's not, I think the intent here is to say, if it is unavoidable, then to me, that feels like the maximum possible compliance part. I still won't like it, but there's literally no alternative. And I would not want to say like we kept cesspools in downtown because we couldn't get comfortable with that for an improvement in the system. But I think I'd only get there if ZBA said no. If ZBA said no, then come back and talk to us. And, again, I think we'll have a thoughtful conversation. And for me personally, that changes the calculus of where I am right now.
Okay, I think that's good direction for us. Steve, did you have any other thoughts or comments?
No, I think that makes sense. Dan, I can work with you and we'll work with Gino and CBA to kind of bring this up and lay it out and get their thoughts on it. Oh, that sounds good.
All right. Good luck with the project, guys.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. Have a good night.
You too.
And Dave, I think you win the longevity award. So let's pivot back to you and appreciate your patience.
Well, thank you.
So just to kind of recap, I'd sort of asked you to mull half walls, and I mulled them too. As like, if I said that no walls doesn't make it a room, I don't see how I can make a half wall say no wall's still a room, but a half wall's not a room. I decided I wasn't sure that makes sense. One question I do have is, and again, I'm not enthusiastic about it, but I want to make sure you know what other people have done in a sense of transparency. One thing that is allowed from a room count standpoint is if the only problem is how do I have a dog room that is not on the upper floor? One of the things that can be done is that basement rooms that are not accessible to the outside in a ground level exit can be deed recorded so that they do not count towards your room count. If you then combine your second and third bedroom 2 and 3 into one bedroom, then you are sort of fine if you then finish the basement space, deed record that as not a room. Again, like I said, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of what works for you, but it's not something that would be obvious in looking at the regulations. And if your architect hasn't worked in Sherborn, it's something I just want to make sure you guys have on your radar as stuff to think about. We hate it, but we do it. And so, again, I suspect our recommendation would be your septic system's about as old as I am, and I've been told I'm full of it, and your septic system certainly may be too. And so, if it's feasible, upgrading that would be appealing. If that's not feasible, I think we just want to kind of paint a clear picture for you. This is what we'd recommend.
Okay, I appreciate the recommendation about the septic system. We have thought about that. And we're hoping that it's not necessary at this point because it would, there's all sorts of issues for us there. We have talked about it during this break, and we're wondering if we expanded bedroom 3 and decreased the size of bedroom 2 so it's more like a closet size, well, less than whatever an official room is, if that would be acceptable.
I would
Mark?
say go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna ask Mark. I can't
No, I
remember
think-
if it
I
was
think that's-
70 square feet or something. I forget.
But
Yeah,
I would say if it was not a habitable room, for me, I'm like, great, not a room. You've got.
Okay, so we can make sure that that bedroom 2 is less than 70 square feet. Or is it 70 square feet or less, or is it less than? Because we're gonna want to make it as big as we can, I think. But
Yeah, Mark, can you weigh in
the-
on that?
A room for a bedroom, 70 square feet, the requirement for one bedroom, and 120 for a 2-bed bedroom. But as it relates to reducing a room, the function would have to be indicated, like, is it a closet or something like that?
yeah,
So,
so we would have to, so below 70 square feet, so we'll have to figure out, and I assume that's like the interior measurements of that room.
typically, but if the room has a function like dining area, it may still be considered a room. So it gets tricky with that.
Is a dog room a function that we can call it?
I know that's.
I would recommend your function not include the word room in what we call it. So if you called it the pet pantry,
Sure.
that a 69 square foot, 11-inch pet pantry. Because again, I think for me, I mean, again, looking at just the dimensions, this looks like a,
It's about 10 by 10, but one set of measurements said it was 10 by 11, so I don't know which is the 11.
Well, and also just in thinking about the total space for the house, like this is a substantial house.
Yeah.
And so the level of risk of saying, you know, this sort of 6.5 foot by 10 foot room got turned in, like, unless you're really bad, the likelihood that that's going to be a bedroom versus a closet for future homeowner is really unlikely. And the fact that it's not a habitable room makes it consistent with it sort of solves the issue that taking the wall down didn't for me.
Right.
Lisa and Matt, sort of what's your reaction to that from a sort of habitable space standpoint? Does that?
I mean, I think a combination of shrinking the size and either like having like kind of like a barn doory thing or a half wall in addition to shrinking the size, those two things in conjunction with each other would really make it very clear that this couldn't be a bedroom. So I kind of like the combo approach, which, you know, like high enough to keep your dogs in, but
Like
clearly,
a pocket door type thing.
yeah, almost like, but nothing that could be used like as a private bedroom.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
I will admit my son's bedroom in our house, he's in college now, but it's pretty small, but it's a bedroom, you know, like it can fit a bed and a dresser and it has a door in the wall. So like,
Yeah.
I really think the combo of those two things would be,
Yeah.
that would be really great. Yeah.
Although I
Yeah,
would
actually,
also say we've definitely seen master closets or sort of other spaces that were that big. I
Right.
mean, for me, I would say like I would love that. I feel like if we're less than 70 square feet, it certainly makes it easier. A pocket door, a barn door, getting the
pocket door
closet
would
out.
actually give us more usable space there too, actually.
And I think if you pulled the closet out of it, like again, like I wouldn't. This is just saying what makes me happier, not what are the minimum requirements.
No, the closet would have to come out of it because that's
right.
gonna
So I
be part
think
of it.
that actually also helps because then you're like it is even less bedroom like.
Yeah, yes. The closet has to come out because wouldn't that be part of the 70 square feet?
I think it would be, and it's just like again for the clarity of use, like it makes it clear there. And Matt, what are your reactions?
Yeah, I think if it's small enough to not be a habitable space and it's effectively a closet, then we don't count it as a room. If you choose to put your dogs in a closet, it doesn't sound like a fun thing to do, but like it's a thing you could do, right?
Dude, think of it as the world's largest crate.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
No,
it's
it's
way
probably
bigger
better
than
than
a
a
crate.
crate. But I mean, I think if it functionally turns into what is a large closet, then I think it ceases to be a room, and that's fair.
And I'll say I have a preference for it being set up as a closet and designated as a closet because, as Lisa pointed out, I mean, a 69 square foot office could be perfectly fine. So, and it is a room. So if it's more like a closet, I think that's cleaner than, you know, pet pantry could be a room. I don't know. I'd like to stick with things that we typically see.
And that's why I mentioned bedroom to the, sorry to interrupt, Darryl, but I mentioned bedroom at the 70 square feet because in the housing codes, that's where I get that information.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from. A habitable room doesn't have square footage added to it. It says excluding rooms. So everything's considered a habitable room for its intended use, might it be living, sleeping, cooking, or eating purposes, excluding rooms containing toilets, bathtubs, or showers, and excluding laundries, pantries, foyers, communicating corridors, closets, and storage space. So to look at that, yeah, that's why you're getting right to the, you're going right to the right point on closet. That's
Or we
correct.
could label it a pantry too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of far from the kitchen, but we could. Okay, so if we reduce the size of that thing, label it a pantry, everybody's happy?
Yes, and the study can be whatever the study is, because now you have 2 bedrooms on the first floor, which
Right.
means that can be counted as a bedroom. So whether you choose to use it as an exercise space or that becomes, you know, guest space for visitors or something else, that's all copacetic.
Okay, so what are our next steps?
I think it would be to update the building plan to reflect that, and then Mark, would it be resubmitted to the building inspector, which would then route to you, or would it go to you directly and then you would pass it back to Chris?
Typically, it wouldn't go directly to me if it goes on the building app, but David can notify me when he updates the plans.
Okay,
And
well,
so-
I'll have the contractor notify you because they're
Perfect.
the ones who are gonna.
That's fine.
And do we need to do anything else then with?
No,
the Board of
'cause-
Health?
because in that scenario is, and again, just to go through the count, I think I'm right, but I always think I'm right. At that point, we're at 1 for sunroom, 2 for sitting nook, 3 for kitchen, 4 for bedroom, 5 for bedroom, 6 for office, 7 for study. So we're at 7. And from a bedroom count, we'd be counting this as a bedroom. We'd be counting this as a bedroom because they both lead directly into bathrooms. This is a bedroom because it's a bedroom, and this is a closet. And so I think you're sort of good across the board.
Okay,
And I'll just mention that the study, because it is also connected directly, because it's all private space up there, to a full bath.
Right.
That would be a bedroom.
it's a
even
half bath.
Down on the first, is it a half bath?
Yeah, yeah.
It looks like a shower in the corner.
Yeah, just a shower. Is that a?
All right,
that-
then it's a 3/4 bath.
Yeah,
It's not
okay,
a
sorry,
half bath.
sorry.
But either way, you're copacetic with the closet.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is the
Sorry.
closet going to be accessed from the hallway or from the other bedroom?
which closet? Oh,
The-
from
the
hallway,
bedroom- Yep,
hallway.
The new room that's going to be called the pantry. Well, if it's a pantry, then it's access to the kitchen, I understand, but, well, we'll wait for you to draw it up and then we'll go from.
You know, what we call it is kind of up to you people, because we're making you happy. It's gonna be a smallish room. I'm
a
going
smallish space, it's not a room.
right, smallish space. I am going to tell the contractor to put a pocket door in there for all sorts of reasons. And we need a label, and we can label it a closet, or we can label it a pantry. I don't have strong feelings either way.
I would prefer closet because I
Okay.
think we have a pantry and then saying, why do you have 2 pantries? 20 years from now, when they're like, why were there 2 pantries? And then it was like, no, this was the dog closet, just to be clear about sort of what it is.
Okay,
I-
we'll call it a closet then.
Can I ask a question? How many rooms will you end up with then? Because I'm
I-
counting 8.
I counted 7 because I counted this as 1. So I've got,
What?
I ended up 1 for sunroom. I called this space of sitting and nook as essentially a continuous great room.
Because otherwise it was counted as 2, correct?
Yep, and so I kind of said, to me, that feels great roomy, and I get that a kitchen can also be a great room, but I feel okay with a great room being really big. And that's sort of how I counted that pattern of use, partly because it's not demarcated, and so that was my count. I was 1, 2 for sitting nook, 3 for kitchen, 4 for bedroom 3, 5 for bedroom 1, 6 for unlabeled interior room, 7 for study.
Okay,
And I did it a little different. To me, the kitchen and the nook were the
Are what?
kitchen.
Okay.
And then the sitting was the living room kind of thing. So,
And so you sort of, I think.
but either way, still 2.
I would say I think Daryl's count is probably righter, given the sort of eating nook pattern, but either way, we landed 7. So I think 7 rooms, 3 bedrooms, new closet.
Right.
All right. Dave, thank you for your patience tonight.
Yeah, it was very educational.
And it was almost good that we had a break.
Yeah, it was
that you
good.
could
It was great.
think about it.
I'm gonna have some follow-up questions about the septic system, because I realized that our septic system is kind of old, and we might in the future have to do something about that. And who do I talk to about that? Just to ask questions.
I'd say Mark is the
Okay.
person.
Mark is muted, so I'll also nominate Mark.
Okay,
No,
great.
I'm the one anyways, but.
Okay, I know how to get a hold of
Feel free.
it sometimes. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, Dave, have a good night.
Yep, bye.
All right, and so now I think we are just on to our internal business of discussion regarding, actually, we did 127, we did 75, we did those. Do we have any comments? Let me just batch out the other business that I might forget at the end. do we want to do the disposal works installer permit for approval?
Sure.
Perfect. Mark, I will pull this up, but while I do that, do you have any comments?
No, I spoke, excuse me, I spoke to Bob today, Bob Santos, and it was many years ago, I might have worked with him. He does remember me from Millis. I used to work there for a time period back in the 1980s. But I haven't worked with him, but I did let him know today that, one, I asked what job he's doing. He's doing a very small job. He's 34 South Main. That's the pipe replacement because they're adding on to that structure in the back for a studio. And so I told him the key thing is, before you start, you contact the designer and myself, and we do what we call a pre-construction. He seemed okay with that, so I have no problem recommending approval.
And references all checked out okay?
That the staff does, so I believe they've done that reference check, but we can.
Yes, Jean has done it. She didn't tell me that anybody had said anything bad, but she didn't say anything else either.
No news is good news.
No, I was going to say the same thing. So do I have a motion to approve the disposal works installer permit for Rob Santos?
So moved.
Conditional to the pre-construction conference.
Of course.
Thank you.
Seconded
So
and
moved with-
conditional.
Yeah, with the condition. All right. So I'll second Lisa's.
Perfect. Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Matt Vitale, aye. Perfect. And then did anybody have, I read the minutes, but I wasn't there. They seemed lovely. I enjoyed my vacation. Any further discussion or edits that people wanted to bring up, or have any edits been sent to Ellen in a sort of clerical way?
Yes, I sent some to Ellen, one to simplify it, just a couple of sentences. So on things I commented on.
I had no comments.
Perfect. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes with the clerical amendments that had been provided?
So
moved.
moved.
Oh,
Second,
Any further discussion?
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Lisa, I.
Matt Vitale abstain. Perfect. I think I've done the stuff that I will forget. For the 921 agenda items, I'd propose, I know there's been some communication with Silverwood Farm about their events to just kind of check in as we come out of the pandemic for sort of those workflows. So I would suggest that we have that on the agenda. Any other topics that folks know about now?
Yeah, and I think we should delay the discussion about the deed recordings maybe till the next meeting, because
Perfect.
I heard there were a lot of people interested in that potentially, and they're not here.
Perfect. So let's plan to roll that over to the 921 meeting. Anything else? Perfect. So with that, we've got regulatory review and what should I feel like I saw? Did I see a Daryl document to pull up?
Yeah,
And this was on my list of stuff that I wanted to get done for my piece of it, but the week got away from me. So I'd like to include this regulatory review as an agenda item for the 921 meeting as well.
okay.
All right, Daryl, I am happy. I think I'm in your section. Do you want to? Is there anything I need to do for this, or what do we want to do for the discussion?
I'm not sure. I haven't thought. Matt, do you, Matt Beavers?
Yeah, no, Daryl, when I reviewed this, and you sent me draft edits this week, but I have not had a chance to look at them again. I mean, we can walk through it now unless people feel like it's better to just give it more time.
And I think, all right, so if you, do you want to bring that back up, Matt? Or
I prefer not to. I think in looking at it, it looks like they include comments from town council in the comments. And so what I'd love to do is if we can kind of I can either take a second to see if I can obscure comments. I just don't want to sort of disclose. I don't have privilege to
No,
disclose.
probably not easily. So how about I just verbally go through? Let me just find my document and then I'll do it that way. Because I think some things are kind of straightforward, but that's maybe because I've been looking at it longer. All right, hold on.
You might need a special master to review the document first.
I have so many comments, but I'm being recorded. I will say that for the purposes of the record and the minutes, one of my wife's life goals is to make sure that our kids always say that her chocolate chip cookies are the best. I just was recently brought a chocolate chip cookie and I think she's pretty close.
My mother-in-law makes the best, so
We can do a taste test.
all right.
Love it.
Okay, it's on.
I love it.
I have to inspect them first, and I usually do a taste test.
I mean, I think having the health agent do it, there's no stronger endorsement. So I look forward to it. I'll let Julie know the pressure's on.
So are we having cookies at whatever is the first in-person meeting we have? Is that?
Absolutely. Or at any beaver dam that requires site review.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's a good idea.
There was a
All
great
right.
article on beavers in the New York Times this week. Just everyone should read it.
It was fantastic. I had to pick who I sent it to in order to be compliant with open meeting, and I sent it to Daryl. But I was like, this is so good.
Because you knew that I was going to read it because I haven't.
I knew you were going to read it.
Beavers in the New York Times.
It's like eponymous. What can you do?
Yeah.
Then Matt Beavers, you need to see the PBS story on beavers in Canada and elsewhere, things that they've done. Pretty amazing.
All right, I will do that.
When you let them do what they're made to do. Anyway, so here's one. This is all related to, I wish we just called these section 2 or something. I don't know how we refer to 2. And it's called domestic water supply. But now I think we have water supplies that aren't always domestic. There's business and there's, small businesses, other things. So one thing would be to cross out domestic and just call it water supply or non-PWS water supply or something.
I like just calling it water supply. Any objections to that change?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. Do we have that pulled up somewhere that I could just see?
I think there was.
No? Okay.
Yeah, because town council had provided some minor edits, I worked off of that so that in the long run, it would be something simpler to then incorporate instead of having 2 sets of edits going on.
So
that's the issue.
are we basically not proposing any difference between a domestic residential potable water supply and then someone who is maybe
I think
an irrigation well for crops?
I think I can share it. I think I figured out how to hide comments, which I think is the town council piece. Does that pass a gut check for you? Jeff is our select board holder of the.
You haven't brought it up on screen yet, but I think that, did you just do hide reviewing final version or whatever?
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so now we can see it. It won't illustrate what is town council or what is Daryl, and it'll illuminate the commentary, which to me feels consistent with the privilege piece.
All right.
And this is going to make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Okay. So to answer your question, Lisa, we require that all water supply wells in town meet the same requirements as water use for drinking. So I just had so you'll see some things I went ahead and tried edits, and now I hope I can recognize which are mine versus town council. But anyway, all right. So intended for human occupancy for buildings. Well, we've been having there
So
are
you
water
delete-
supplies running to barns
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
other
yeah.
things. So that seemed like something that maybe
Yep.
should come out.
No building. Permit shall be used for which would necessitate use of water.
You know what? I'm going to bring up my copy with all the comments so I can remember. Sorry,
That's
just for me, and then I'll know.
That seems
Uh,
needlessly wordy, that sentence to me. I don't know. I'm not a fan.
I'm gonna stop sharing this so that Daryl can start sharing hers.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm going to
No,
look
no,
at the
no, because
comments.
Daryl's
So you
also has
keep,
the town council comments.
yeah, no,
Daryl
I
just
need
wants
to
to see
see
for
the
herself.
comments, so I know what I'm
All right,
talking
perfect.
about.
So Daryl will consider herself. I've got us back up. Can you guys see the screen? See his
No, I
comments?
gotta keep like moving it. All right.
Okay, so I can't comment on that last sentence other than the word land. Can-
Yeah, what's that
You're not
even
supposed
mean?
to
Land-
indicate what's
land
town
is not-
council?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
not a
so-
defined term. It should be like either property or parcel. Land is not a defined legal term in terms of ownership, property, residence. So
Well,
do not-
funny you should say that because that came from town council, so.
I'm saying I don't like it. Yeah,
Right, which is why I highlighted it, and then Matt and I thought,
yeah, that's it.
Defer to-
We should only reference terms that are defined within our regulations or have like a clear connotation from a legal standpoint, and land is not one of those. So it should say either property or parcel or something along.
okay, so we'll go back to doing something, right? I thought maybe
There
property,
was an issue with property and now I'm forgetting what it was.
right,
I wasn't part of that, so I don't know.
yeah, no.
No, Gerald
we
and I
were-
discussed this.
We were struggling with what is the best thing, so,
We can come back to that.
yeah.
Okay.
And you know
Put a
what?
pin in
Matt?
it.
Skip over 1.3. Let's go down to the more techie things. It was, so for 2.1, again, taking out potable and just make it water,
Yeah,
just so it isn't in people's minds,
clear.
isn't limited to
Yeah.
only what's being drunk by people. So I always like the but not be limited to, because who knows
Yeah,
what
I
kind of
agree.
wells might come along.
agree.
And then I just changed some of the wording because it said and springs gravel packed. It just didn't make sense to me. So that was a minor adjustment for the wording. Where I crossed out and, added a comma, and added the word or. And then the highlight there, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Manual of Individual Water Supply Systems is a document that exists. It is posted on the EPA webpage. You can search for it. It's from 1991, I believe, was the last revision. And I don't know if that's still the best document.
Why do we need to cite anything?
I don't know if we need to cite
I would
anything.
just put a period at the end, and because things and guidance change all the time. I don't
Yeah.
like a citation that's static. I don't think that's a good idea.
Well, and also because it's so very old, so I couldn't tell if they just have it because it exists versus they advocate that it's still valid and appropriate. So
Can I ask a quick question, Daryl? This is very detailed on each of these subcomponents. Does anywhere in here say that you're only allowed to have one water supply per property?
Yes, that was my reg.
That's a
Did
camp
I miss that?
regulation. It's in a different section,
Yeah,
but
I'm
it's
in
a,
the wrong.
it's a camp regulation.
yeah, it's in
Okay.
our regs. Yep.
But is it in this section 2 or what?
Where
section?
it's
are-
elsewhere.
Where is this, Daryl? Like, I'm confused.
This is 2.
So where did I add the restriction on one well per property?
It may be most useful to just get all the way through this.
I think it's section 7 is number of wells.
We
Oh,
did that a few years ago, Jeff.
It was
That
like
was added.
2 years, like only like a couple of years ago.
Well, I could see someone turning to this section and not going to that other section. I don't know, but anyway, I'll stay out of it.
Yeah, we could reference it and just remind people about that.
And this is a definition section. It's not a restrictions or criteria or anything
Like
else.
how
So-
many? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, I think
I
the
sec-
hard thing about this is that we're taking one section out of context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had the same problem when Daryl and I reviewed this, and it may help to just sort of go through and see everything.
Yeah,
and then
I don't
we'll
like
go through
lot either. Like, again, property, parcel, something that has an actual legal definition.
Right, and
And it's
that's
not even
why I was
consistent. Yeah.
Yep.
it's not
trying to highlight this because
Yeah.
we say there's land, there's property, there's
Yeah,
lot, there's
that's not
parcel.
good. Yeah. no.
We need to, and part of it is the complexity of some people buy more than one parcel, but it's serving just one residence and it's all under one ownership. So
I
how
think
do
we do a better job of that in our section. So I would just say to look at that and then come back and make it consistent with the definitions and verbiage in this section. Because we spend time thinking about that in our section in 7 or whatever it is.
Okay, so, all right. Driveway is highlighted here because I don't think, if you slide down, I don't think there was any definition for driveway in ours.
Yeah,
Oh, just, there was, okay, the private road. I thought we should refer to planning board driveways because we had that issue come up. So that's a question about whether we just point to their definitions or we combine it, something this and planning board. And
I like having planning board definition because I feel like they're more expert on what's a driveway than we are on what's a driveway. And so
okay,
they seem, but I don't have strong feelings.
As long as it's actually defined in their regulations
Yeah.
somewhere.
I agree.
right. And we didn't get to test that out. We were about to with a project that was before us, but then we didn't get to that. I think we can't do now, but whether at some point we want to define water conservation, but that's not, I don't see that as for now, because to me, that's a really tough one to tackle, but I wanted to float it for people to see if that has any interest of something we should define at some point for sustainability purposes. And
Does that belong here?
It should be a bylaw. Yeah, is that what
Yeah,
you're getting
I
at,
don't know.
Lisa?
Yeah,
Okay.
I
So
don't
not.
feel like it belongs here. I don't know.
all right,
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's not a simple definition. It needs to be, that should be a section, but
Yeah.
maybe not.
okay, and it could, you're right, it could be more of a planning and also building code. It might be starting to pull in more water conservation issues into it. All right, so we can go on, let's see. So here are some of the more substantive issues. So under 3.0, since we've had some indication of decon or disinfection or flushing that's been going on where we don't fully know how it's being done and why it's being done and what's happening, is to then specify that it should be done, as I say, by certified well drillers and with approval from the Board of Health, so that we know what materials they're proposing to use. And then if it's something that they should not be using, we can have a say in that. And also if something is going to be pumped for longer than a standard period, and we'll get to that, what that length of time should be farther down, but in flushing, but I think they go hand in hand.
I'm
So,
wondering.
but this
Daryl,
one in particular is just about decontamination and disinfection, because I believe the well drillers use something more buffered form of chlorine rather than straight Clorox, for example.
Sometimes.
And
but-
then how much is used and all that is important because you can damage components of the system from the corrosiveness of it.
Should there be a section 2 to notify conservation? They usually review all well applications, but if they're going to be flushing out quite a bit of water, that could also concern conservation if it affects any nearby conservation land.
Okay, that's a good addition.
Conceptually, it certainly seems like a reasonable addition. Just because, I mean, it seems like a weird thing to need to make a rule for, but it certainly feels very clear that like, this is not a DIY project.
Right. Okay, and then I don't know if we just want to go over the concepts and then if people want to look and if they have some wordsmithing ideas, do that. It's, you know, offline kind of thing. Well drillers, they just had the wrong references and terms. So this is just a correction. And I looked up the Water Resources Commission, which no longer exists. Or it exists, but it's really dealing with policy around what availability of water resources is and how they're being used. So they're no longer dealing with the well drillers, that's now the DEP. And they refer to it as certification, not registered. Okay. And maybe Mark, if you'd like to confirm that, just for another set of eyes on that.
Sure, I'd be glad to.
Okay, that'd be good. So I could send you that little excerpt. Okay.
While we're not editing it, note the camp amendment at number 7.
Mhm. All right, and at some point we've got to address the semi-public water supply section because we've had cases where that could have been applied, but there just isn't enough detail in there and instructions about when and how it should be used. It's a good concept. It's filling the gap between a single family home and some of the multi-unit projects that we've had that fall below the threshold of a public water supply. But again, it's just not well defined yet.
I don't
know
think
if,
that's not where we're at in what we're showing on the screen, right?
no, but it references that
Where?
section. So that's the only reason I had it highlighted here is just as a
2.4?
reminder that that needs work and I don't know what to do with it just yet.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
okay. And then again, pump houses referring to that old EPA manual. I'll need to find some kind of substitute. And Mark, I didn't know if you knew offhand references that you currently use for that.
The only time I've run into pump houses recently was with 59 North Main Street. So
Yeah.
I'd have to, I mean, they were designed based on the knowledge of the well driller and the consultants. So outside of that, I'm not for sure. I could look up references to see how they reference pump house.
Okay. Yeah, that would be helpful if you can pull that off of their plans. And then we can check that, whether it's
Some of the
suitable.
important things on pump houses is security, alarms. Those are the two major ones. That way, if there's an issue, especially after, say, they take over the pump houses, they have ways to know if something's going wrong with the water. And that usually is built into the pump house equipment.
Okay. I could believe that. Something about maintaining the pump houses too, but. All right. And then under section 11.1, I found this, all right, when you're determining what the well yield should be, usually we look at what the proposed building is going to consist of. But then it says a bedroom shall include any undeveloped area that could be made into a bedroom.
I don't like that. Is that?
No, it sounds
Yeah.
wildly broad, like the garage
Yes.
could be converted or the basement could be chopped up into 5 bedrooms. I don't know.
Well, and if we have a design flow that says this is how many bedrooms you have, that is a rate limiting performance step for what goes in must come out.
Right.
Hey, Daryl, like, I feel like this is a really detailed review on something that I have had zero opportunity to look at. So
Okay.
I am not comfortable just looking at this on the fly and giving my thoughts. Like if
So-
we're supposed to be giving feedback, I'd rather have a chance to review it and give feedback. I guess what's the point of this exercise?
So I think it was in the materials, but I also like, this was on my like, oh, I should do this. And then at least for me, I didn't get.
I
to
didn't
it.
see it. Okay, sorry. I guess I
It
didn't
was
see
just
this one.
added today.
Right.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah, okay, like, so I guess I'm just not comfortable saying like,
So
Yeah.
let's roll it over to the 21st. Does that work for folks?
Sure. And
That's fine with me.
frankly, I figured that it would be more of a just concept review and what the points were about it. And it'd probably be helpful when you can see all the side comments as well.
yeah.
And that's in there.
So can we get a version of this that we can see those, Ellen?
That is what
Yeah,
was
that's
uploaded.
on Google Docs.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would be able to like see all those little
Yes.
bubbles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that works.
Okay.
So let's roll the discussion over to the 21st, and I will try to be somewhat less wildly delinquent on the things that we discussed last time and work on updating that. And we'll include this discussion there. Sound good?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. With that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And I forbid further discussion. Have a good night, folks.
You need to do a roll call.
We have to vote.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beaver's eye.
Lisa, I.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Night.